Historically, Americans have been called to be the keepers of the flame of liberty, and that liberty depends on innovative thinkers, the free exchange of ideas, and people with a can-do spirit.
The flame of freedom speaks, the flame of freedom within each heart, the flame of freedom saith unto all.
Elizabeth Clare Prophet, noted author, lecturer, educator, and religious leader, interviews revolutionaries in every field who provide the missing dimension to the news that affects you. Listen now as Elizabeth Clare Prophet and her guests discuss critical issues of the day.
Welcome to Summit University Forum, where the flame of freedom speaks. 70 years after the Bolshevik Revolution, the Soviet Union remains an enigma. Are the Soviets trustworthy partners in the arms control agreements? Or is the Reagan administration being taken in by the evil empire? Here to help us answer these questions are two authorities on Soviet military strategy, General Jan Sejna and Dr. Joseph Douglas Jr. General Sejna and Dr. Douglas, welcome to Summit University Forum. General Sejna, as a member of the Central Committee of the Czechoslovakian Communist Party and Assistant Secretary of the Czechoslovakian Defense Council, you knew the top Soviet military and party leaders, including Khrushchev, Brezhnev, and members of the Soviet Military High Command. Will you tell us about your first meeting with Khrushchev?
I met Khrushchev first time in 1954, and it was very interesting because I was young, very young. Today I'm still young, but I was very young. And Khrushchev was head of the Soviet delegation on the party congress where I was elected to Central Committee. And on that party congress, Khrushchev had two speeches. One was official speech, which was average Marxistic blah blah, everything best is in Soviet Union and worst in United States and the West. But later on Khrushchev asked permit to have private speeches, as they call it. Of course, who can tell Soviet leader no? We will tell him just once. So Khrushchev had so-called private speech. But what he said, it was fascinating, not because he was almost anti-communist and as American liberals like to present him in American media. Khrushchev was fantastic communist. I think after Lenin, the best master of deception. And now his third one it is Gorbachev, which is even better. And in his private speech, Khrushchev said, comrades, we have to change our policy, not strategy, because strategy is same since Lenin was born, destroyed the free world. But policy, tactic, he said we have to get as much as possible loans from capitalists. As more loans they give us, as more we can buy modern technology. As more modern technology, as stronger our military forces. And he said things which you can say are not exactly Marxistic. He said all loves go through stomach. You see, until that time we go and talk to workers and told them you must work harder for less money and so. the main things is next generation will live in paradise in communism, because communists always promised you paradise 100 years from now, but not bread tomorrow, because they don't have it. Where he was not realistic, he thought he can catch United States on the economic field and agriculture next 10 years. It was utopia. It is same today with the Gorbachev. I don't know if you heard the story. Gorbachev was talking to workers in Moscow and told them, comrades, we have to catch the capitalists on the economic field and go ahead, front of them. And one worker stood up and said, Comrade Gorbachev, I agree to catch them, but I don't want to go front of them. And Gorbachev said, why? He said, because I have just 1 pence, and they have hole behind. And if we go front of the capitalists, they will see it. Gorbachev said, don't worry, in Asia, in Africa, most guys, they don't have pens at all. And the worker said, oh my God, they must have communism a long time before us. It was similar with Khrushchev, and he said exactly, comrades, if American will sell us combine for harvest, the combine will be green, we will paint it red, and it will work for communism. Now after the party congress, we had party with Khrushchev and his mistress Fursavova, and after a few bottles of vodka, everybody were very happy. And Khrushchev told us first time about his peace coexistence policy. He said, comrades, we have to move communism further. And everybody knows in 50s communism stagnated because people, especially middle class, they were scared about Stalin type of communism. And he said, if we want to move communism further, we have to change the image about communism. We have to change the image about Soviet Union. Same like today Gorbachev, the major things is change the image about Soviet Union and communism and stop, as he called it, anti-Sovietism. It was same things. And he said, if we want to move communism further and change the image, we cannot say just KGB are guilty for the tragic murders, which everybody know in whole world. We murdered 20 million people, own people. If we do same, nobody will trust us because in the past we executed marshal, generals, and so on. The highest man, Stalin, must be guilty. It must be shock. You see, it was not his pleasure to criticize Stalin on the 20-party Congress because they were comrades in Politburo whole life together. It was necessary to shock the whole world and change the image to make excited the liberals. Same like today, they think maybe Gorbachev is like Lee Koka, he wants to change Soviet Union to capitalism. And who was also presented on the party was a friend of mine who was composer. And you know, the people from art, they are always more enthusiastic than marshals and party leaders. He made toast and he said, Comrade Khrushchev, it will be fantastic. We will have peace coexistence policy. We will be friendly with people in the whole world, travels everywhere. And as you know, Khrushchev said, shut up, you idiot. I don't want peace coexistence policy because I want to let capitalists live forever. I want peace coexistence policy because I want to kiss, and I want to kiss them because I want to kill them sooner than Stalin thought. It was last toast of a friend of mine that evening, and all of us understand what is peace coexistence policy, the major strategic deception. So it was my first meeting with Khrushchev.
I remember the day when Khrushchev was at the UN.
Yeah.
When he took his shoe off and he pounded that shoe on the table, and when he said, "We will bury you,"
Yeah.
I can assure you that shockwaves rippled across America with that statement. And I wanted to ask you, in your relationship with Khrushchev, how was your rise in the Communist Party from the hour of this private speech that he gave?
Until I defected, or there will be different story?
Right there, from that
Right
point.
then, okay.
From that point, your rise.
Joe, don't sleep. because he heard it already a couple of times. I was born in a very poor family. My mother never had shirt, shoes. My family is Catholic family. Just one uncle was communist from the beginning, and he had a major influence to me. Of course, he was never in Soviet Union, same like today most people, or all people in Nicaragua or Salvador, they never see the communism in real life. Just Ortega goes there, drink vodka and eat caviar, and came home and explained to them how fantastic it is, and all of them think they will eat same if they have communism. It is what I thought, because my uncle always told me, in Soviet Union bread is free. You walk from the school or factory, you pick up bread on the street how much you want. I flew first time in 1956 to Soviet Union, and I didn't see bread on the street, I didn't see bread even in the stores. Now, of course, education free and all these things. So I thought it is fantastic, at least for my mother, which I loved like nobody else. And it is why I told my father I will join the Communist Party. And father said, no, you are idiot, because communists give you small piece and after then steal everything from you. But you know how it is, if you are 18 years old, you know everything much better than father. And it was my case too. I joined the party, and because the poor family, because the uncle, it gave me good background. And I was 18 years old, I was already secretary of the region party committee in charge about agriculture. I can tell you how voluntary farmers go to collective farms through jails. And in 1950, it was 48, in 1950, the Soviets, I must go to regular military service, like listed man, which I hate, because in Czechoslovakia they hate uniform. Uniform is symbol of occupation, and because I hate so much the uniform, it is why I was general. So I was in the service, and Soviets decided to build satellite forces same like Soviets. And the Czechoslovak forces, military forces, grew through one night from 50,000 to 250,000. Every one of us who was from communist family or member of Communist Party, have both legs and both kidney, got ordered to stay or go to school for secret police, KGB, or commanders or politcommissars. And because my experience from the party, I got ordered to go to military political school, where we were two groups, propagandists, they had 60% Marxism and 40% military, and politcommissar, which I was selected, we had 40% Marxism and 60% military. And after 6 months they gave us rank lieutenant and sent us back to the troops. Me, because I was bad soldier, I got a very low position, deputy commander of regiment, I was 21, and politcommissar of regiment. Some people said I grow so fast because I was 40 years old and I was general. It is baloney. They thought because I was friend of President's son, which is true. I was friend with him, but when I met him, I even didn't know his father is president. Because that time, it is typical how party exploited young people. Young people, they want power, it doesn't matter, with gun, position, whatever, because younger generation, young people, they want to show the older generation, they are smarter, they can do better things than fathers. And it is how party exploited. It is why they put us to the position and control by the old communists. We had that time, younger general was 28 years old. Friend of mine was two-star general, he was 32 years old. But anyway, before they sent me to the regiment, they told me the commander of the regiment is double spy. You must help the counterintelligence arrested him. And the counterintelligence are everywhere, from regiments or battalions up to the minister. And I say, why he is spy? Because in the World War II, he was in the Great Britain. Everyone who was in the West was automatically spy. And secondly, his wife was Jewish and had the relatives in Israel, so he was double spy. So when I met the gentleman, he was 6'6". I looked like his baby, you know. I went to the regiment and I said, "Comrade Colonel, I'm your deputy and politcommissar." He looked at me and he said, "You know what? You don't know anything about military service. I give you room in the barracks, free meal, and just look around and shut up." So to tell me, politcommissar, shut up, I was sure he is double agent, maybe triple. So, but I tell you, I realized he was a fantastic man. How commander supposed to be, honest man to anybody if you were son of president or carpenter. And so I observed very carefully. He helped me a lot. And one day party decided all of us must sign paper, we drop religion. So I brought him the application to sign it. And problem is, ladies and gentlemen, these people who are exploited by Communist Party, so-called former bourgeois, they think they can stay forever. They don't know party exploited them just temporary before they educated own leaders. And they try to be more communist than really communist, and it is tragedy. And it was also his case. Because party decided we have to drop religion, he want to show more than party asked even. And he told me, "You know what, John, next Sunday, before the mass will start in the local church, we will put our military band in front of the church, and when the priest will start the mass, the military band will start to play and we will destroy the mass." I look at him and I said, "Comrade Colonel, you are crazy. The people will take stones and drop it to kill our musicians. But worse things, they will destroy the instruments and we don't have money buy new." And he looked at me and started to cry. Can you imagine this guy who go through the war? I was 21, he was almost 50, cry. I didn't know what to do with him. So I told him the truth, what they told me about him. And we became the best friends. Our regiment was the best in whole military forces, thanks to him, not thanks to me. And I was there a year and a half, and I was appointed to deputy commander of brigade and politcommissar of brigade. There was also former bourgeois officer, but he was different, he was chicken. And, but anyway, the brigade was also good, and they called me to Central Committee and they said, "You will be elected to Central Committee. Because in Central Committee you have always the top bosses and just few people, 2 farmers, me, captain, I was that time, one colonel, to show the Central Committee represented everybody, which is absolutely lie." So they called me to Central Committee, they said, "You will be elected to Central Committee." I said, "How I can be elected? Nobody knows me." They said, "Forget it, Politburo already decided." I learned step by step what is Marxism, how to read it between lines. We had party congresses, I mentioned you, where was Khrushchev. And when first secretary mentioned my name, I look like rabbits, who will vote against me? Of course I was elected 100%, no problem. After the party congress, they called me back to Central Committee and they said, "Now you are member of Central Committee, you will be elected to parliament, actually be senator." I said, "How I can be elected? People don't know me. Where is my brigade?" They said, "Forget it, Politburo already decided." I was elected 99.9, easy. At the same time, they appointed me deputy commander and politcommissar of all engineer troops. I was major. I was boss for 15 generals, a few thousand officers, because in communist system doesn't matter what you have here. The money and power is from your position. You can be major and you are boss to general. It is different than in the United States or in the West. And we had first meeting of Central Committee and I asked the chief of main political administration, the political boss in military forces, "Comrade General, what it means? I'm in Central Committee," because I thought Lenin and me, or me and Lenin. He said nothing, just look around and shut up. So it was good news. I shut up until we had meeting about food industry, because you know they always discuss food industry and they never had bread. And I asked for speech and criticized one member of Politburo who was in charge about food industry. Actually, it was lady. And before I mentioned the name, everything was okay. Once I mentioned the name, everything was so quiet. I was there like mouse. I finished the speech, no applause. First secretary said, coffee break. Invited me to special room and said, what you did? I said, what I said is true. I can prove it. He said, yes, but you are not on the party meeting in your village. You are on the meeting of Central Committee. And if you want to stay, you cannot criticize members of Politburo. I understand again more Marxism. If you want to stay, shut up. Okay, so I shut up until Khrushchev criticized Stalin. And we had meeting of Central Committee 2 weeks, non-stop show. And again, the big bosses, they just said, oh, Stalin was bad, but in Czechoslovakia everything is okay. But all of them worked with him together. I asked for speech and criticized Minister of Defense, who was member of Politburo. And again, it was no applause, coffee break. First secretary called me again and said, what you did again? I said, what I said is true. The Minister of Defense is worse than Stalin. He said, yeah, but we have enough what Khrushchev did about Stalin. We don't need our case in Czechoslovakia. Shut up. And Minister of Defense, who never talked to me because I was nobody for him, it is how it is, equal rights in Communist Party, he invited me to Politburo Club, which I didn't know it exists. When I saw Olympic-sized swimming pool, I thought they swim in the river like me. Italian, French wine. The girls who were warrant officers, they must do everything by order, very easy. He tried to make me drunk, which I must say he was successful because I never drank Italian and French wine before. And when we were in swimming pool, he pushed me to go back next day to Central Committee meeting and say what I said yesterday was wrong. I heard it, but I cannot prove it. And I told him, why you did this? And he said, because Stalin gave me order, Vorshilov gave me order. I told him, how he can give you order? You are Czech minister. How Stalin can give you order? And he said, you are really idiot. If you will stay, you will see. And there he was absolutely right. So I go next day to meeting of Central Committee, and I talked to a friend of mine who was colonel, and he said, don't go, don't say anything, they kill you. And he stood up and said, I'm right. And after that, Premier Minister said, I'm right. Because everybody was scared about the Minister of Defense because he married First Secretary daughter. And it gave him power. They hate him, but nobody say anything. Once they have the opportunity, they criticize him, and he was fired. Thanks God, and good luck for me. And they called me to Politburo, and they said, now we appointed new minister, who is not politician, he is professional, military. And you will be his chief of staff and de facto from party point of view, his watchdog. So I stepped to the office and I find room with 14 safes. The safes were full of documents about people who were executed. Because the minister, former minister, was before Minister of Justice, because father-in-law always appointed him where he needed him most. And he knows how the system works, so he took the most important documents with him to Ministry of Defense. So I look at the documents, and I tell you honestly, I still believe so much Marxism. If the people who were killed, and the documents show it, if all of them were former bourgeois, I would still say it is all right, because it is a Red Revolution, or we kill them or they kill us. If French, Italian communists try to tell us they are different, it is a lie. But because many of the people were also former communists, voluntaries in Spain civil war, I was thinking why they kill own people, why the party kill own people. I didn't realize, I didn't understand at the time, Soviets don't like to work with clear communists. They like to work with people who are compromised. Like later on Minister of Defense in Czechoslovakia, who was before fascist. You can blackmail them, they must do everything what they want. Or today President Husak, first secretary, who was major witness to people who were executed. So if they show just these documents, he is finished. But if you were clear communist, they don't like it. So it is why they killed this communist. So I took the worst cases and go to minister, and as I told you, he was not politician. I told him, Comrade Minister, the former minister is a gangster, he is murdered, because these people sent him letters and said, I fight for the party whole life, tomorrow I will be executed, help me. No, like dogs, you know. Minister even didn't look at it, he was scared even to see it. He said, look, I didn't see anything, I didn't hear anything. You are a member of Central Committee, go to First Secretary. So I go to First Secretary and told him same. He looked at me and he said, how many times I told you, shut up? If we open the case, everybody would say, not him, but the party is guilty. Of course, don't tell me the leadership didn't know that. Of course, they directed him to this. I come back and I didn't see the documents anymore. The KGB were there, they confiscate everything. I tell you, it was the first shock for me when I was thinking, what was my idea and where I am? What is really Marxism? For whom? What is the party policy? For whom? Of course, it is not easy to change your mind overnight. You are disappointed, but still, I must say honestly, if some highest defectors say they always hate the party, it is baloney, because they are not so stupid. If you will be 20 years in top position and hate the party, they will find out. No, I say honestly, I believe Marxism, absolutely.
But that was the wedge, though, wasn't it? The beginning of a disillusionment.
It was the first things, it was the beginning. And now, of course, when I was Chief of Staff of Minister of Defense, I was everywhere presented where I was Minister. I was appointed also the Assistant Secretary of Defense Council, which Defense Council is the most important body in communist system because they have rights, top 7 party and military and KGB leaders, they have rights to make decisions about top secret military intelligence and counterintelligence things. So it was great experience to be there together with Soviets every week or every 2 weeks. And of course I also had department which take care about minister guests. I thought if you are marshal or colonel or captain, you have same rights, you are comrades, same level. God, I was wrong, I tell you. I was 3 months in the office, I just want to tell you examples how it works. 3 months in the office and minister called me and he said, Marshal Grechko, who was that time Supreme Commander of Warsaw Pact Forces, by the way, brother-in-law to Khrushchev, he said he decided to have meeting of Warsaw Pact military leaders in Prague and you are in charge to prepare it. I was scared. I met the Chief of Staff of President, of course because Marshal Grechko. The castle was to our disposition, actually to Marshal. So we prepared everything 2 days before the meeting. 2 Soviet colonel, counterintelligence, visited us and minister and me must show them how everything is prepared. So we walked to the conference room and the colonel said, what you will do with this door? Minister said, what do you mean? He said, they are not high enough. Marshal is 6'6". And when he walked to the conference room, he cannot put his head down because he's marshal, he must work straight. You must make the door higher. Minister said, look, if president give me order, it is not in my power, I can take engineer battalion and destroy the whole castle through 1 day. It's no problem, but I must have order for that. He said, okay, ask president. Now we walked to the conference room and he said, well, we'll sit on Marshal. And we put tables like you. I said, right here. He said, what you will do with the chandelier? I said, what do you mean? Marshal cannot sit down under the chandelier. Because if the chandelier fell down, it will kill him. I was thinking, thanks God. You have to move the chandelier. And you know, Czech crystal, it was couple tons. He was so stupid, he didn't know we can move the tables. So Minister said, okay, I will ask President. Now he said, where is telephone VC? Telephone VC is in Russian language, telephone vysokoi chistoty, the highest clearance. And the telephone must be established everywhere, even if marshals go fishing, because he must be ready to direct the war any minute. I said, it is on that side of conference room. And he said, what if marshal will drink coffee on this side? I said, in that case, he pick up the cup of coffee, and he said, Khrushchev called him, and walk there and pick up the phone, which is logic. He looked at me like I'm CIA agent, which I was not, because I said, marshal must cross the room. Now I tell you, we were a little bit lucky because, as I told you, he was brother-in-law to Khrushchev, and Khrushchev was unusual man, I must say the truth. It is why he must go out, because he didn't fit exactly to the party line. He had he was primitive farmer, you know, and many times he got mad and he said things which they didn't like. When President called him and said, look, we got this order, he said, look, if Marshal wouldn't like it, kick him somewhere and send him back to Moscow. Of course, he can say so because, as I said, he was his brother-in-law. They fixed it after that when they had dinner together. Now, we had the meeting, and Marshal gave us order what to do, and now he said, any questions, comrade? Polish Minister Spichalski, who was that time still liberal because he was just 2 months out of jail. Later on, he was the worst Stalinist. He said, comrade Marshal, I think 4 maneuvers for each battalion every year is too much, we don't have money for them. Marshal said, look, I decided, sit down. Sit down like in the first junior high school class. Any other questions, comrade? No, comrade Marshal, we agree with you. He said, you see, this is typical socialistic unity. All of us, we have same idea. In that case, you are free. And I invited you tomorrow for breakfast. I tell you, breakfast 9 o'clock, and you know how it is in military forces. If the Supreme Commander say 9 o'clock, the captain is there 12 o'clock in the night. So all of us were there 7 o'clock. 9 o'clock, Marshal still slept. Minister pushed me, go and check what can I do. Front of his bedroom, 2 generals with gun. You know, if Marshal sleep, don't bother him because you can be genius, he kill you next day. Because he was so tall, we had for him special bed and special John. When he go to exercise, it was privilege of engineer troops. They had van, where was the bed and the John. When he stopped in the forest, the soldiers jump out, put the John under the tree. He did what he have to do. They clean it and put it back and follow him again. And same was in the bed. Every time when he stopped on to sleep, the bed was 7 feet long, because if his legs go out, fingers, you were in trouble. So I walked back and back again, actually just behind the corner, and told Minister, look, he still asleep. Finally, he woke up 10 o'clock, walked out with a sport suit to the park where he feed the squirrel with the nuts. If he was not drunk, and he loves Italian Cinzano, the vermouth, if he was not drunk, you can walk. Sometimes I walked with him 3 hours. He wouldn't tell you one word. He just walked like sheep to think how to kill American capitalists. Nothing else was in his brain. Absolutely paranoid. So I tell you, we had breakfast 11 o'clock. All ministers, chief of general staffs wait for Comrade Marshal when he is ready for breakfast. And I can tell you stories unbelievable. So you have to finally think what you believe and how it is. And of course, if you go and talk to 5,000 people or whatever, you tell them what you want, because they must shut up as I have to shut up. But if you go and talk to your mother, and she tell you, look, why is this, and you try to give her baloney, and she tell you, look, shut up. You are same bastard like the others. You really shut up, because your mother look at your eyes and she knows what is lie and what is true. So when finally I was thinking what to do. Of course, you don't want to say, look, I don't like it, because if you are lucky, you will be farmer again or carpenter, and you don't like it because you belongs to highest class. You have everything where you point by your finger. Now the fact that you don't know how, and you cannot ask, you will ask just once. That's it. So once, it was 1967, we had party, celebrate the Red Army. And I came home and I told my son, John, I cannot go there anymore. I cannot see it. We eat and drinks like pigs. And next day I have to go and talk to workers and tell them work harder for less money. And my son said, how about if we were defected? I never thought he would think about it. He listened Radio Free Europe, not that blah blah, but the American music. And but I never thought, because all his friends, everybody were there. I said, why would you like to defect that? And he said, because I would like to race the car. And I don't have the opportunity in communist country, but I can do that in United States.
To do what?
So, race the car.
Car racing.
Car racing.
Race.
Sorry.
Race the car. I get it.
I'm sorry, I used to work almost 1 year with British government. I got a little bit British accent. So I thought, if your son would like to race the car, it is some reason to defect it, yes? So we made decision how to prepare everything, and he and his girlfriend, who is today his wife in the United States, they did best job, because, as I said, I cannot go anywhere, and they were students. The students always talk against the regime. They always talk how to disappear and these things. So they did the best things, but it took me 1 year, because I tell you, it is not easy. You know, you will never see your mother. You will never see your friends. I was never in the West. You don't know what will be the life in the West. Like if you were diplomat before, it is easy. You know life in the United States. But finally, before the Prague Spring, it was again fight in the party. I got order from General Yepishev, Russian general, what to do, which I didn't. He called me next day and he said, you didn't what I told you. I said, no. He said, you know what it means? I say, yes. Next day was published article by other general, KGB agent, who said, what I did in my position was sabotage of military readiness. Openly in newspaper. If somebody says so, you don't have to wait too long, because it is the worst crime. So I came home and I said, my son, that's it. We will go to race the car. We have to go. And I tell you, I did just one mistake. I asked for diplomatic passport. And the girlfriend of my son, she asked just so-called touristic permit, which were 2 pages paper, Czech and Russian language, which nobody understand anyway. And but because my position, they give me diplomatic passport, and I play game. I want to go skiing to Poland, because the passports give you permit to travel to any Warsaw Pact country. Not communist country like Korea or Vietnam, they are smart, just behind the electric fence. So I didn't have problem to, I left Czechoslovakia Sunday morning, because after Saturday parties even secret police eyes are closed. I did just mistake with that passport. I didn't have problem to cross the border to Hungary, after then to Yugoslavia, because that time it was permit, if you visited Bulgaria, you can go through Yugoslavia. But I had problem go from Yugoslavia to Italy, which I want to do. And I had just one friend, because you cannot trust anybody in communist country. I had just one friend who was a doctor. I take him out of jail because he did something wrong, illegal abortion, but he was otherwise a fantastic guy. He was originally Yugoslav. And he explained to me what to do in Yugoslavia and how to go to Trieste, the harbor. And he was even ready to take me illegally from Yugoslavia to the Trieste. But I refused because I was scared he want to go back, they will kill him, they will find out. So I was on my own. Monday morning, I was in that small village Koper, went to the Italian consulate and asked permit, visited for 1 day Trieste. The girlfriend of my son, she got permit immediately. When they saw my passports and my son, they said, we cannot do that because you don't have permit to go to capitalist country. I said, look, in Czechoslovakia everything is changed. We have Dubček and so. I said, no. If we give you visa, when you come back, you will be in trouble. Problem was I cannot tell them I don't want to go back. And if you know in Italy 5 million people vote for communists, you are scared, everyone is Russian agent. So I fight, the guy said come back 1 o'clock. So I wait in the forest because I was scared about Interpol. 1 o'clock we came back and consul talked to me. Like father saying things. I said, look, it is not your business. If they put me to jail when I came back, you will be still consul. So finally he said, give him for 1 day. To me was enough 1 hour. So we took the car, go to the cross-border station, where was everybody go easy to Trieste because the Yugoslavians, they work there. When they saw my car, the policeman said, get out of the line. I thought that's it. Took me to the station. And my son, his girlfriend, they wait outside. And now he was unusual smart policeman. He said, look, you don't have permit. I said, look, are you Czech or Yugoslav policeman? I have everything okay with your government, Italian, what do you want? He said, don't give me the baloney, I know regulations. And he called the chief, and they let me wait in the hallway 30 minutes, and they just called. I tell you, ladies and gentlemen, the longest 30 minutes in my life. I play game, I'm macho, but I sweat, I tell you. And my son, his girlfriend, they were in front of the window, they make fun about me. After 30 minutes, the chief came out and said, give him permit. I don't know if somebody somewhere works good or stupid. I contact American embassy in Prague 2 times through other person. After then, CIA told me they send message everywhere around Czechoslovak border. One general will probably defected, give him help. Maybe it is true, CIA is so smart and they had somebody in Yugoslavia and he helped me. I don't know. But anyway, I was free. I crossed the border and there was Italian soldier. I don't know if he even spoke Italian, some boys from the mountains. And he saw I had troubles. He tried to make me troubles. Check everything except the space between tachometer and engine where I open it and put some documents which I brought with me. I think he didn't have screwdriver. Finally he put our passports, we are Bulgarians and we were in Trieste. Now of course, you know, any general, if he doesn't have good assistant, he is lost. And it was same my case. Was in the Trieste, look for American consulate, I didn't see anything. It was, now you don't have money, you are scared about Interpol. Now it was already 4:30, dark, February. I asked one taxi driver, where is American consulate? It was just behind the corner. I just drove around. The signs of our consulate are so small, the defectors cannot see it. Bigger sign. So I jumped from the car and the bureaucrats were running already out. I tried to stop 3 of them. I said, I'm such a person, I would like to defect to United States. They even didn't stop because that time I didn't know. Today I know the wives wait with TV dinner, so they must be home very fast. One of them said, look, go to Italian police, they will arrest you and after 3 months we will see. Which was good news, I tell you. I go back to car and I said, my son, look, you have to wait to raise the car. We have to go to jail. And John said, oh, no, go back. I don't want to go to jail in Italy. So I go back and I met Vice Consul Mr. Weiss, fantastic young man. And it took them, it shows you they are not so perfect. It took them in Czechoslovakia to Czechs and Russian 3 days to find out I crossed the border. They thought I had accident. I'm somewhere in the river under the ice. They check all hospitals. They cannot find me. when they find out I crossed the border, I was at the safe house close to Washington, and it makes them really mad. And if you ask me if I'm happy, especially for my son, because he is big boss. I talked to him 5 years, and he raised the car, crazy American, it was not enough. He also raised the motorcycle until he broke this bone. And it happened not because he raised the motorcycle, it happened because he was drunk in the restaurant and it was raining. And he showed his friends how he's macho on the parking lot and fell down. So I was sorry about him, but on the other hand, when alcohol didn't work, he cried. And it was good because he stopped the race, and now he's big boss in computer company. And if you ask me what I don't like in the United States. I don't like things same like you, crime and these things, but generally I always say, I don't like our foreign policy and hot dogs, because both of them have very bad taste, I tell you. It is very hard.
Well, tell me about your debriefing by the CIA.
Oh, I cannot say CIA, it was US government. I hope it was some of CIA debriefing.
Well, did they
also.
or didn't they want to know about Soviet strategic policy?
Well, you know, it is problem not just because nobody talked to me about Soviet strategy. It is not problem because I think the people were stupid or whatever. No, I must say some of the people who asked me questions were very, very smart American patriots. But problem with the United States is 20 years ago, today, and unfortunately tomorrow probably, because United States don't have any strategy. First, long-term strategy is SDI. Otherwise, sometimes I think we even don't have policy. If I look at what's going on in Latin America, Middle East, South Africa, now already our liberals, they go against the Congo, Zaire. They go step by step against all our friends. Now you want to talk to somebody about Soviet strategy, it doesn't bother him because we don't have any strategy. Why Soviets should have strategy? You want to talk to somebody about Soviet involvement in terrorist business or narcotic business. You know, in America, everything is show. If it is government work or TV show, it must be interested for people, for Congress. And 20 years ago, who would talk to you about terrorists? Because still they didn't hijack airplanes, and so it came back later. So I just don't want to blame the people. It is simply minus of the democracy. It is the system. Look, I'm here 20 years, and I heard some secretaries of defense under Carter administration, I think, he presented 3 strategies. I mean, for superpower number 1, I always say it is like a gas station in Albania. Superpower number 1, strategy for 2 years, what it means. If you look at the history, of course, 300 years ago, what was dangerous to the United States? Nothing. Soviet Union didn't exist. China didn't exist. Nicaragua didn't exist. Castro didn't exist. But today the situation is absolutely different. And if you don't know your worst enemy, if you don't know what is his strategy, how you can create your policy. It is why we are always like fire department. When the fire is on the roof, we jump there. We cannot stop the fire, most cases, and we lost. You know, we are not ahead like Soviets. We are waiting. When situation push us there, and I think it is very bad, because I think we have all opportunities to beat them every day. Every day. Look at the Afghanistan. When we were in Vietnam, it was opportunity for them to push us to the corner. But today, we have opportunity to have initiative and not wait when they beat us. But you know what I'm trying to explain to you?
Yes.
It was this major problem because nobody wants to hear it. They prefer to tell you But Marshal Konyev, how many children he has, and what is his second wife? She was beautiful and very young, but the chauffeurs must help him a lot, the Czech chauffeurs, when he was in Prague. But strategy, what it is.
Why don't you tell us then what is the Soviet strategic plan?
I'm sorry, Joe, I still have to go on, but in Czechoslovakia, I'm talking about Czechoslovakia, not other satellites. We got the so-called long-term strategic plan first time in 1967. It doesn't mean Soviets didn't have such a plan before, because as I told you, in communist system, everything is planning. For 1 day planning, 1 week, 1 year, long-term 15, 20 years, and so nothing exists without planning. It is one reason why the system cannot work. Now, satellites complain, especially from economic point of view, because if they give you order, you must produce MiG-17, let's say, or 15, because you belong to first strategic echelon units, and you just build the factory, start the production, and they came to you and say, next day you must produce MiG-17. You must change again everything. They make a joke, they said if this planning will accepted by Ford company, they will bankrupt next day in the United States. So the satellites complain and ask some longer term view. So finally in 1967 they give us the headlines for long-term strategic plan for 15, 20 years and view further. Now I must tell you, ladies and gentlemen, absolutely honestly, the major targets were, are and will be United States. Because as Khrushchev told us, and they repeat this, United States are the major stone on the way to communism. Once the stone is away, as Khrushchev said, the door for communism in Europe and elsewhere are open. So it is why I don't agree if some idiots think if they go to global war, they will burn Europe and they will not burn us, because they need us. Ladies and gentlemen, what for? Any military corporal knows if you prepare attack, you don't kill somebody who's weaker, you kill the major forces and the major enemy, and it is United States, unfortunately. They don't want to burn Europe, they repeat it all the time. They can kill people by chemical weapons, biological weapons, but they need the industry to work for them. If they have Europe, if they have Japan, Argentina, and Australia with corn and everything, what for they need us? We just make them troubles because people look at America like symbol. So it is major targets are United States. Isolated United States, make United States weaker, destroy the morale of the people, especially young generation, and Joe will talk to you about narcotics and these things. And of course, satellites participate. Now somebody can tell you, how do you know? In Soviet Union is everything so secret? It is true. They are even scared to tell you Brezhnev is dead because they are even don't trust on people. But if you are satellite like Czechoslovakia, where all military forces belongs to first strategic echelon units, which must be ready to go to war any minute, they must tell you something. Otherwise, you prepare the troops for nothing. If you are commander of division, you must tell commanders of regiment what to do if you prepare attack. And same is with the satellites. They are just a regiment of Soviet troops, of Soviet KGB operation or GRU. And it is, if you are not idiot, you look at it, you know what they have in the mind. They have few faces. Right now we are in the face of deep social changes in third world and capitalistic country. They believe by 1995 they would have ready so-called revolution centers like Cuba, Nicaragua, Gaddafi in Libya and so, from where they can spread the Red Revolution further. After then, just United States will be left like capitalist island. I don't want to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, it will happen exactly that time, that years, because they are not genius. What I'm trying to tell you is how it is dangerous, how we can never trust them, because they never give up such a strategy. They never give up such a theory. If you take Lenin, Stalin, Khrushchev, Brezhnev, and today Gorbachev, it is same, except they use different word. Khrushchev said, I bury you, and Gorbachev said, our system will replace your system, so what is different? It is same, except he make it smoother because he will visit at us. I tell you, and the Soviets, the dictatorship, they have much better opportunity than we have to use all instruments which they have in their hands, because we cannot dictate in the United States any gas station must have reserve for the war of gasoline or diesel or whatever. They can dictate. You cannot build one school, one highway in Soviet Union. You cannot produce one conserve, which is not proved by general staff. If you go to Czechoslovakia and you see so-called tourist package, where is cheese, cigarettes, and so on, it is exactly food for one soldier per 1 day. And commander of such a division, he knows where is the warehouse or the food store, where are reserve for him. Before the war start, he just go and pick up this reserve. Can we do that with Giant or Safeway? They will say, go to hell, you know. Same is intelligence services and military forces. Simply they can orchestrate all these instruments to same strategic goal. And what I want to tell you is interesting, especially now in the period where we want to sign the treaty with them. They said officially in that plan the most important role in the struggle for peace and socialism play the military forces. It is funny. Military forces will establish the peace in whole world. Ladies and gentlemen, in 1967, when Czechoslovakia got the headlines for Operation Plan is the top secret document in the country, communist country. It is in the general staff. It tells you how large must be military forces, what equipment, and how they will attack the West or defend the country. In 1967, when Czechoslovakia got this order from Soviet Union, because the plan must be proved by Supreme Commander of Warsaw Pact Forces, the Russian Marshal, they counted Czechoslovak, Soviet, East German troops and Polish direction to Scandinavia have 3 days to reach River Rhine, means French border. After these 3 days, fresh Soviet troops, second echelons, will come cross the Czechoslovakia, Poland, East Germany, and occupy other part of Europe. After these 3 days, from the Czechoslovak military forces, and it is officially in the documents, will be left just symbolic battalions. Everything will be killed, or by counterattack from NATO, or by mass of Soviet troops which will cross the border, the Czechoslovakia. I have this document which I brought with me in 1968. And here you have the black on the white. The main duty of the Czechoslovak Air Force is, together with Soviet Air Force, to orchestrate first mass strike to the West, and second duty is stop possible counterattack from NATO. So this is official document from General Staff.
Are you saying that they're planning that the Czech troops will be killed as they go ahead?
Absolutely. There will be just so-called symbolic battalions. We counted life, officially in the documents, for commander of platoon in the wartime for 4 hours. How much they believe everything will be killed.
In 4 hours?
4 hours.
These Czech troops will be killed?
Yeah.
By NATO forces?
By NATO or mass of Soviet troops which will cross the country and go ahead, you know, one or other.
The Soviets will kill the Czechs?
What do you think? What they like? They never trust anybody. They will be very happy as most Czechs and Polish troops die as better, because I don't know if you heard what happened to American journalist. He visited Warsaw and asked one Polish guy on the street, if Soviets attack you from one side and German from other side, who you will kill first? And the guy said Germans. And the American journalist was shocked because he thought they hate more Russians. He said, why? He said, the Polish guy said, duty before pleasure. So it was simple like but this is the very sad story when you go and talk to people and tell them we belongs to first strategic echelon units. As I told you, they must be ready. The Czechoslovak troops, that time Soviets were not in Czechoslovakia, they had 1 hour to cross the border to West Germany. 1 hour. It is why 90% of soldiers, officers, must be there, including 10% can be out, including people who are sick. Otherwise, everything is there. And the top Soviet military leaders, they inspected these troops on the border. If they are really, they declare alert. They inspected if they are really ready to go. Today, I think it is even worse. The time is probably much shorter because technology is much better. Plus, Soviet troops are also in Czechoslovakia and, of course, in East Germany, Hungary. They improve own positions. I like to see, ladies and gentlemen, once our missiles will be not in Europe, middle-range missiles, once we don't have nuclear weapons, who will stop that 15,000 Russian tanks on the West German border, if you count that Soviets, satellites, and so on? I like to see it. There is no power to stop them, and it is exactly what they want. It is very dangerous to trust Soviets. They don't want power in whole world. It is like trust cannibal. He doesn't want to eat any more human being meat. It is same things. I tell you, I worked with Soviets 18 years on the top position. I never heard one Soviet party leader or military who said they want to be honestly friendly with the United States. But I heard every day how to destroy this country because it really bothers them. And if I tell you something else, I will lie.
I'd like to make very plain the strategic plan and the change in 1963 from the defensive and to the offensive strategy.
Yes.
And the centerpiece of this strategy, is it a first strike against the United States?
See, you have question almost like Russian marshals, how you, how you understand military strategy. Yes, it was changed in 1963. In 1963, until 1963, everything was prepared for defense because they thought they are not strong enough for offense. They were behind by nuclear weapons and these things. Marshal Malinovsky, who was at that time Minister of Defense, he visited Czechoslovakia and other satellites. And he said, comrades, we have to change our preparation. We have to change our tactic from defense to offense. And he said, for the next war, we have three possibilities. First, the NATO missiles will be first in the air. Second, our missiles and NATO will meet in the air. And third, our missiles must be first in the air. And he said the two first possibilities are not acceptable for us. Since then, ladies and gentlemen, everything was prepared for surprise attack. If you go to Czechoslovakia, if you go to Soviet Union, look at just simple things. We don't have any civil defense, for example, in United States. It is joke, our civil defense. I can bring you pictures from open magazines, Czechoslovak military magazines. They have even plastic covered for cows. They have in collective farms showers where they will clean the cows from radioactive dust and so and so. Everything for peace coexistence policy. If you go to Czechoslovakia since mid-60s, anyone from 6 years old children who are so-called pioneers, until you die, everything is militarized. So if Mr. Gorbachev wants to change these things, if he shows us his operation plan to Mr. Reagan, we can trust him. Until he say, and Joe read it, we read it together, he must still prepare the military forces because we are dangerous for him. What is different? It is same things except deceive us, except achieve his goal. As he said, the major things for his perestroika is to be, from strategic point of view, independent, food, technology, and so on. Once we help him to do that, I don't think we will see him in Washington. We have to run there and tell him, please, don't burn us tomorrow, do that day after, because we want to still live one day. So this was...
I want to know if the Czechoslovakian army and military personnel, as well as those of the rest of Eastern Europe, who are to be used as the first wave and sacrificed, if they know that.
The problem is, the top leaders know that, who are compromised people, corrupted people. But simple soldier, who will tell him? Nobody tell him. Problem is, and again I have to tell you honestly, most people here in the United States, in the West, they don't believe these troops will fight because they don't like Russians. It is again, I always say, we see everywhere Texas, It is not question if these troops want to fight or not. Question is what they can do. It is not like our soldier, he can write a letter to congressman and complain, and congressman give help to commander and so. They will investigate. They're like me, the other must shut up. And if you see the control of the troops, where from party organization in each unit, from counterintelligence officers. Now before the war will start, the Soviets will send advisors from regiments up everywhere. Today, after Prague Spring, they are talking about mixed staff and units. Until Prague Spring, Czechoslovakia got privilege, as Soviets call it. They had rights to organize own front. Front means the first strategic units, operation and strategic, which was really, we can call it privilege, because commander of front has rights to use tactical nuclear weapons, which Soviets never give Czechoslovakia. They said before the war will start, we will deliver it to you. But today they are there. I think if the front has 6 armies, probably 3 of them will be Soviets and 3 of them will be Czechs. So simply what I want to say, I don't say some soldiers will not try to go to other side, but I cannot imagine there will be commander of division or army who can give order to his troops turn rifles against own Politburo. I cannot imagine. Look at the history. Do we have an example? Look at Hungary, look at Poland, look at Czechoslovakia. What happened? The worst case was in Hungary, where soldiers give rifles people on the street, because people told them, look, you are people's army. How you can kill us? Give us rifles. Soldiers give them rifles and go see girlfriends. Why it happened, as Soviets analyze it, was because the leadership completely collapsed in Hungary. And it is what happened. But on the other hand, if you look at Poland, nobody believe, because Americans believe unbelievable. Americans love wish of thinking. Americans wish if it will be like that. It is never like that, but we love it to think it is like that. And if it doesn't happen, we create situation it was like that. If you look at Poland, everybody told you Jaruzelski can never use troops liquidate Solidarity. And it is how you cannot trust communists. Look how he was smart. He first sent troops to each villages and towns. They supposed to help supply the food to stores. They did a little bit, but mostly they collected information who are local Solidarity leaders, who are anti-party leaders and so and so. Once they were ready, they liquidate everything. Now, we want to satisfy ourselves because we didn't believe it will happen. We say, our analysts say, oh, he did it because he is Polish patriot and he didn't want to let Russians step in. Ladies and gentlemen, can you ever hear this baloney? Russians are there since 1945. They don't have to step in. They can just ship more troops like the Hungary, which they did, and that's it. So why we lie to ourselves? Just because we don't want to confess. The Soviets are more successful with deception, with strategy, and it is tragedy for us. I'm sorry. So what I must say, the troops will fight. Most important things is, ladies and gentlemen, how the war will proceed. If our intelligence services, and it is the highest duty, if it is electronic or personal intelligence is to find out when they want to start the war. If we will find out, we don't let them cross the West German border first hour, reach River Rhine next 2 or 3 days, I tell you, any Czech or Polish guy will be happy to kill at least one Russian. But if they will be successful, they reach the River Rhine, don't ask Czech, Polish people too much, because they know everything is over. And this is the highest responsibility of our intelligence services and the West Europe. I'm sorry, it is very sad story, but it is what we have to tell the truth, our people, not lie to them.
What happens when they reach the Rhine? What happens in the response of the French and the response of the Soviets?
I tell you, first of all, they never thought Soviets, the French nuclear missiles will be used against Soviets. When we discuss always the enemy troops, as they call it, the most dangerous for them were Americans and Germans and British, which I think Germany, it slowly goes down, because I saw a few years ago some article, they asked West German people what you will do if Russian troops cross the border, Russian tanks. I believe they said 75% who were asked, they said give up, which is very sad. So what is left actually is Great Britain. And if we counted Italian troops, French, Belgian, and so Soviet just left, they never counted it. Because if you see how they are prepared in these countries, the strongest Communist Party and so, they don't believe once they are successful, these countries will fight. Plus, 20 years, since I'm almost 20 years here, it is even worse, because 20 years ago, they had just little airborne troops. Today, when they attack the West Germany and move to River Rhine, same moment, the thousands of airborne troops will be next to Paris and Amsterdam and harbors in Holland and so and so. So it will be not just the war on the line and the River Rhine, it will be immediately destroy the whole West Europe. Ladies and gentlemen, what for the Soviets do everything to control Middle East? It is not just cut us from the oil. It has strategic importance, because if they control Middle East and they will be in Portugal or Spain, the West Europe is in military circle. If you look at it from oceans, so what the West Europe will do? And you know how long it will take our troops move them to Europe, if we will be able to move them at all? Because I can show you article from Czechoslovakia where they say 110 nuclear bombs will completely cripple the United States. I don't think they need 110. If you look at the blackout in New York, 4 hours, or what happened, if they destroyed a couple cities and a couple electric stations, you cannot even go to toilet, you cannot even cook, you cannot do anything. For Russians, it is no problem, because they still cook in the wood stove, you know. So it is big deal. So this is dangerous things. I think if they will be able to surprise us, we will be not able to move troops to Europe at all. Forget it. Before we move them there, the Europe is finished. The Europe is over. And this is what we have to see realistically. It is why they hate middle-range missiles in Europe, because they were directed to the mass of first echelon units, Soviets and other, and they can burn them. Before they left barracks, they can burn them. So, I'm sorry, it is very sad, but it is the truth.
We're going to come back to the scene of Europe and the first strike on the United States, INF and Gorbachev. But I would like to pursue the thread now of the strategic plan with you, Dr. Douglas. And you have written some very key books on the subject, co-authoring on Soviet strategy for nuclear war, and Soviet military strategy in Europe. As you see it, from your expertise being an American, what is the Soviet strategy for nuclear war today and for Europe?
I think General Sejna certainly captured the essence of their strategy when he said their strategy is to strike first. If you look at nuclear war, and I think one of the things we need to do, practically independent of the discussion, is recognize there are great differences of approach between the Soviets and the United States. In nuclear war, this is no more apparent, or it is no more apparent than in nuclear war. For example, there the Soviets really focus on preparing for nuclear war, to fight and win a nuclear war. There's no question about it. The United States does not prepare for nuclear war because basically since the early 1960s, we've had this belief that nuclear war is impossible, that there can be no winners. Hence, you really don't have to prepare for nuclear war. You buy nuclear forces to deter the other side. And we have a philosophy that says all you do is you buy them and you put them around, and they will deter the other side. You really don't have to be too serious about using them. So you have a very strong difference between the Soviets and the United States. This is additionally important because when you look at the way in which the United States views the Soviet Union, we view it as we would like to see it, as General Sejna mentioned. And those of us who are in the business of defense analysis refer to this as mirror imaging. We see what we want to see. We reflect our own value judgments. We see those things which will make the policies we would like to support make sense. Above all, we do not look at them as they are, because if we did, what we were doing would seem silly. And that is very difficult to understand, but it is very true.
Americans are afflicted with a metaphysical approach to military strategy.
Yes, it really is non-existent. We talk about it as though it were there, but it is non-existent, and the Soviets know this. One very skilled writer once wrote that the United States doesn't think in strategic terms, they think in tactical terms and targeting terms, but they don't really know what strategy is all about. That was Henry Trofimenko.
Maybe they should start learning chess in kindergarten.
That might help, or read Sun Tzu or something. So in thinking about these things, the Soviets and the United States think very differently. The United States tends to look at the Soviets according to what we want to see. And there's a fourth factor that compounds this, and that's the Soviets recognize this, and the Soviets spend a great deal of effort trying to convince us that what we're doing is right. And that goes back really to the time-honored deception guidance that Lenin gave to Dzerzhinsky, the first chief of the Soviet police under communism. When Dzerzhinsky was asking him what to do in the deception toward the West, and Lenin said, "Tell them what they want to believe." And they're masters of this, and they do it very well. And we see that really being played forth today in the nuclear area, because the Soviets have gotten very wise over the years. They have learned that they need to keep their intentions, their means, and their mechanisms secret. They don't want to allow us to see what's happening and awaken. And therefore, as they have grown to understand the West better, they have grown to understand they need to keep what they're doing secret better. So that while they talked very clearly about war fighting and their objectives back in, say, the 50s and the 60s and even into the early 70s, they suddenly became aware of the fact that people were recognizing what they were saying, were complaining about the U.S. policies, and some people were listening to them. So they started a shift in which they started talking about not war fighting, but also about deterrence. And in 1981, as a Russian explained to me, "It's too bad you are now starting to talk about war fighting when we have decided to agree with you that mutual assured destruction is the proper path." Well, they're very artful at this, and we succumb to it in all innocence. Now, I say this because when you look at nuclear war and the Soviet approach to war, it's going to be very different from what people see and think about in the West. It is extremely serious The Soviets believe that it is possible to win a nuclear war. It is most possible to win a nuclear war if the other side is unprepared. And hence, the objective in war, and we are in a sense at war today, is to get the other side to relax its preparedness, to disarm, if you will, to not be able to fight a war, so that victory can actually be a meaningful victory, an important victory, and actually so that the Soviets can employ their forces, which say they would be very reluctant to do in the late 50s or even possibly the early 60s. The Soviets are preparing for war, and part of that preparation is to stop the United States' preparation. Now, when you look at nuclear war, another thing I think you have to recognize is that it would be tremendously destructive. We aren't sure what would happen. I think in terms of the United States, it is reasonably clear today that we would be destroyed. There's no question in my mind whatsoever about that, for the simple reason that we have subscribed to a policy of mutual vulnerability, if you can believe that, for 20 years, and hence we have no defenses. We would be destroyed.
Now, is this figure of 110 nuclear warheads, is that a factual number?
It's extremely accurate. The question is that a Soviet calculation that is the same as a US calculation? Did the Soviets learn it from us? Did they learn it from their own calculations? In using that, does that mean that they are trying to really tell people in the West that our analyses were right? Now let me go back a little bit. When you're talking about 110 nuclear weapons, you're not talking about a strike of 110 weapons. That, first of all, is not the case. A strike against the United States would involve, in the first hour, my guess is at least 2,000 strikes, possibly 3,000. Because if you're talking about a nuclear strike, I mean, you don't play games. This is very serious. You do not start a nuclear war unless you intend to win. So the Soviets weren't about to start a nuclear war back in 1958, 59, 60, 61, 62. It wasn't until they started to see and recognize that their forces were going to overtake ours that they decided the time had come to change their plan to go to an offensive strike. Now, when you strike, when you start a nuclear war, what's going to hit you back is nuclear weapons. Therefore, your first duty to limit damage to yourself, to win the war, is to destroy the opposition's nuclear weapons. Now, you've taken the actions right today to do that. A major portion of the Soviet strategy in peacetime, and there is no peacetime, we are at war, we have been at war for 50 years, 70 years with the Soviet Union. And if anybody thinks that's differently, they just do not understand what the Soviets are doing as peaceful coexistence, or as détente, if you will. We are at war. It's just not an open, hostile war involving nuclear weapons. As part of the preparation, you work to stop the United States from thinking nuclear war is possible. You promote the idea that it's impossible, there will be no survivors. You work through arms control to get the United States to slack off of its military spending. You use your enormous propaganda apparatus to develop an anti-militaristic thinking in the United States, to develop the thinking against nuclear war, to get against the idea that there can be any future after nuclear war, and hence it doesn't make any sense to prepare for it. So you start, this idea that nuclear war is impossible. You promote that image. And let me come back now to this 100 nuclear weapons. Part of that image is really to reinforce that idea that you don't need more than 100 weapons to destroy the other side. Or if the Soviets had launched the weapons against us, and those were to take out our military forces, the additional 100 weapons is to sort of destroy the economy, the transportation, the ability of the United States to recover. And of course, the United States then, if you think of a mirror image, only needs 100 weapons to destroy the Soviet Union. Now the figure of 50 to 100 weapons, the first time it emerged in the United States strategy was in the early 1950s. And I believe it emerged in terms of some studies conducted in the Boston area. I believe they were probably funded by the Navy. But they created this image that you don't need more than 50 weapons to deter the enemy, or 50 weapons will destroy the United States, and sometimes that number goes as high as 200. But it's in that range, 50 to 200. That is enough to destroy the country aside from the ones that are striking the military forces. And any weapons you have beyond that number are meaningless. They're overkill. And that's what people have in mind when they talk about overkill. That is the philosophy that drives the arms control strategy. You don't need to worry about the thousands of weapons we have or that they have, because it's all overkill. Let's come back to cover that point on that weapon. Now come back to the strategic planning.
Yes.
You are at war today. You have an enormous effort to convince the United States that the war cannot be won. War is impossible. You don't plan for it. You don't prepare for it. If you are in a situation that you believe a war might come about, and you decide that you're going to strike first as a Soviet, you're going to do that with the idea of winning the war. You will not do that unless you believe that either the United States has already launched a strike in which you're launching one to preempt that strike, or unless you believe that you do have the ability to destroy the vast majority of the United States forces, that the United States will be unable to launch a counterstrike in an organized fashion that will be so severe that it will kill the communist system. If you have in your own mind the idea that war is coming, that you have that capability, then you decide, okay, I may go to war. If I do, my strategy says above all, I'm going to do it with surprise. You are not going to be aware when the Soviets launch that strike. They will tell you we're at peace. They may even invite the president to meet the Soviet Union to resolve the crisis, which is the context within which they're thinking of going to war. He may invite the president to meet him in Geneva, and the minute they're flying to Geneva, the strike occurs. You're going to be caught with surprise. I think a good example with that is the termination of the war between the Soviet Union and Finland. The Soviets signed a peace treaty with Finland that was to take place at 12 o'clock. At 11:30, as the Finnish soldiers were leaving to go back home, the Soviets unleashed the largest artillery barrage in the history of the war and inflicted the most casualties. Now, with the Soviet strike, it will be with surprise. The United States, having been conditioned to believe that war is impossible, will not believe it.
And we will not believe they have struck when they strike?
Will not believe they have struck when they strike. It will be attributed, whatever there is in terms of warning will be attributed to erroneous sensors, to errors in the missile sensors, which we have had in the past. It is just very unlikely that anybody will believe actually that war is taking place until the missiles start landing. And by that time, it will be too late. As this war unfolds, you will have the war preceded with sabotage directed to negate your ability to respond. Before the war starts, you'll have you'll have political actions directed against Europe to split Europe away from the United States so that they will not take part, so as to basically paralyze Europe. The strikes against the United States will take out all nuclear forces, all major military forces, definitely all command and control, and I would guess would do that, within an hour of when the war starts.
What about industry?
Industry in general, they might hit, but the only real types of industry I think they would hit would be electric power, to cripple the United States, to make sure nobody thinks they can go back to war or recovery, and also critical military industries, certainly places such as Los Alamos, Livermore, Albuquerque, places that are the center of a rebuilding of a nuclear power, for example. Possibly Los Angeles, possibly Palo Alto area, Silicon Valley. It's hard to say how many they would put into that category, but certainly their plans, as they talk about it in the literature, as they describe it doctrinally, are to destroy the capability of the United States to go back to recover and continue a war. So you're going to have an enormous military strike. I think the next thing that you recognize in looking at Soviet strategy, or perhaps the last thing, is that, and again, a difference between the United States and the Soviet Union. When the United States thinks of nuclear war, we think of nuclear missiles, period. The Soviet Union, you think of all forces, all means, each used to its best advantage. You are not fighting a war with nuclear weapons as the only means, because all nuclear weapons do is they destroy targets. They do not occupy territory. They do not control territory. They do not seize territory. They are not about to attack the United States and just let the United States recover. The Soviet approach will be to destroy our nuclear power, to destroy our ability to regenerate nuclear power, to so demoralize the nation that there's no question of the people rising up to continue the war, and then by some means they will plan on seizing critical regions of territory and actually occupying the country.
What means do you think that could be?
Well, in terms of seizing the territory, if you look at what they've done in the past, I think one of the most effective ways is the use of chemical and biological weapons. That's what have been used in Afghanistan. That's what's been used in Southeast Asia. It's been used many places to get hard-to-reach people in hard-to-reach areas.
Does this involve massive troop movements from the Soviet Union after the first strike, after the point of surrender?
I think you have two different troop movements that you're of concern with. You'll be concerned with the formation of troops within the United States from disaffected units. Then you'll also be concerned about troops moving in. Now, many people laugh at that idea. The idea of the Soviet Union coming into the United States is really ridiculous.
That's why I'm asking you about it.
But, you know, think of how much of the United States is destroyed.
I am.
And given that, it doesn't take a lot of forces to come in and exercise control if you're going to use extreme methods of control. Now, the question in their mind is what's going to happen to them in response. And nobody knows, certainly, how their calculus works. In 1960, the Soviets would have been devastated by a U.S. response had the Soviets gone to war. And that was certainly the case in 1962, say during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Today, it's openly acknowledged that the Soviets have a first strike capability. Many people, particularly those who are against U.S. military forces, would object to that. There's no question in mind that they have a very effective first strike capability, and the President has acknowledged that they have a first strike capability. What is key, of course, is how do the Soviets assess this? And my guess is their assessments are much better than any U.S. assessment because they have access to tremendous amounts of material about U.S. forces that would amaze most of us. They certainly, I think, can, in their calculations, believe that they can be very effective if they strike with surprise to destroy our land-based forces, bombers and missiles. I think they can also be assured that they will be able to destroy over 50% of the submarine-based forces. There should be no question in their mind they can destroy most of the command and control. So what they end up being concerned about is the few submarines and how those submarines will act on their own in the event that the United States command and control capability has been decapitated. In 1960, there was a certainty as to what would happen. Today, there is an uncertainty. Would they do something like this based on the uncertainty? I wouldn't think so, unless there were a crisis which they believed justified it.
Something like this being a first strike?
Yes.
You mean the remaining uncertainty about 50% of the remaining subs at sea?
That's still a lot of nuclear power.
Would prevent a first strike?
It would give them pause for concern.
For the now, for the next.
It would give them pause for concern,
years.
and it will also give them a tremendous incentive for their own defensive capabilities. And again, here, in evaluating a Soviet strategy, we have to ask, how do they view the effectiveness of their own defensive forces? Again, we tend to not think of defenses as being very effective. We have none. And we have none is justified by, we say, well, they can't be very effective. And sort of a circular logic, we justify our own position. The Soviets don't believe that is the case. they don't believe that is the case is demonstrated by the tremendous effort they have put into defensive capabilities. Whether you're talking about air defenses, missile defenses, the radars, every year there's a new revelation of the Soviet activities in space and the Soviet defensive capabilities. Now, how do they feel about those defensive capabilities? How do they assess those capabilities and their ability to perform against the remaining submarines that might exist, or the one or two missiles or aircraft that are actually launched?
Well,
we don't know. We hope.
They are prepared to sacrifice 20 million of their population to win a war to devastate the United States. They have excellent civilian as well as military civil defense. And they have hardened those defenses, which are targeted around Moscow.
That's true, but they have to be concerned about the change in U.S. strategy that was announced in 1979, which said basically that maybe our first target should be Soviet command and control and the leadership. Now, if that's the case, then you're right. They're not concerned about 20 million people. I mean, it's not in their calculations. But if the majority of those 20 million are the leadership, then they might be. And that contributes to the uncertainty in their mind. But here one has to differentiate between, I think, if they're going to war, how do they go to war? Which is what I've been talking about. There is a war, how do they go to war? You prepare in peacetime, every year you're better than the preceding year. That keeps continuing until a crisis happens when you decide you're going to go to war. And that's how you fight the war.
A crisis as one in the economy of the enemy, a crisis in the enemy's position.
Well, a crisis, for example, in 1973, you had conflict in the Middle East between the Israelis and Egypt in particular. At one point, I believe it was the Third Army, which was about to be encircled. And there was threats of a Soviet airlift into the area, and U.S. forces were going on nuclear alert. One could conceive at such a time that they might be concerned about the United States actually starting to use nuclear weapons and decide, hey, we can't afford that. War is coming, we better plan for it and execute a successful first strike. I don't think that crisis warranted it. I have a hard time seeing a crisis that would warrant it. However, it's certainly possible that one could exist and that they could interpret it as being such that they would go to war, in which case they would go to war as I described. But overlying that is the fact that they appear to be winning on a day-to-day basis. I mean, every year the balance of power shifts more to the Soviets. Every year we seem to be more condescending in our approach, more willing to give them the trade, the military assistance that they need. Hence, why would they want to go to war? If they want to go to war, it's going to be for a very, very serious reason, I think. And given that, however, how they go to war would be very devastating.
Would an effective deterrence be to put up some ABMs and low-tech systems so that the Soviets would not be so confident of succeeding in a first strike to destroy a retaliatory strike on our part?
Well, it's what the United States would do to change all that is a very, very difficult question. I think you have to say, well, the United States would sort of stop, would recognize Soviet strategy for what it is, and would start to address the fact that, well, we really don't have a strategy, maybe we should have one, what should it be? And then you have a very, very long-term process of re-achieving a military capability which would enable you to implement that strategy.
It doesn't really have to be that long if you use existing technology and some existing material that we've dismantled and warehoused. And it doesn't have to be that complex if you look at a simple form of civil defense. Just how much will deter the Soviets even for a few years while America is awakened? And what does it take to get Congress to act?
I wouldn't want to undersell the problem. The Soviets have been hard at work since 57 is when they really went out on a major drive. The United States was at work then too, but in 1960 we started believing that arms control would solve things, and that what we really needed to do was let the Soviets catch up with us so they wouldn't feel so insecure. So they have the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. They've got close to a 30-year lead on us. The things they have accomplished in that period of time have been enormous. Now, the idea that the United States can reverse all this in a few years, I think, is not in the cards. There are things that can be done.
What we want to do is not necessarily reverse it, but just create a deterrence so that a first strike does not look that inviting.
The most obvious thing that can be done is certainly to protect the retaliatory force. I don't think there's any, of all the actions you would like to take, what you need to do is to make it clear to the Soviets that he cannot execute a first strike, a successful first strike against our nuclear forces. And the best way you can do that is really, in the cheapest way, is some type of say, a first tier defense of the land-based retaliatory forces. That is probably the thing that's most easily implementable in the near term, if people don't try to get the last 95% or last 5% of performance out of systems, if they don't look for the high-tech solution but are willing to take something that could be very low-tech but very effective. That's probably the single thing that you could do most effectively.
Could the President declare a state of emergency, expose what you're saying to the people, and declare that we must put up certain defenses and put us on that footing without going through the many years it takes to get this bureaucratic machine and the whole thing rolling to get up a first system of ABMs?
I think that would depend on the President.
It's legally within his right to declare the Soviet military posture today cause for us having a state of emergency.
I don't think he would do that.
I don't think he would either, but I just would like to know if anyone who occupies that office
whether or not it's legal, I
that.
really don't know. If I were going to do something like that, if I were going to seek to change things, I would not do them in that manner. I would try to effect these changes in as covert a manner as possible, and then explain them when I knew what I was going to do and when the plans had been proven and were effective.
Do you happen to know if we may be doing such a thing on a covert basis?
If I did, I wouldn't talk about it. One of the things that's very interesting in SDI, I'm 100% in favor of defenses, and I think it's almost criminal that the United States has no defenses. People I guess the administration have been able to get away with that because the American public really does not recognize how true that is. They simply can't believe it. SDI is a system that was introduced by the President in March '83 in terms of the idea of providing defenses is, I think, a terrific idea. I think the implementation was almost, I would describe the way in which it was implemented as sabotage. It was really implemented in such a way that it was almost impossible to carry out and doomed to fail from the beginning because it was put in a future time frame and it was opened up totally to the public scrutiny. And so it has seen the fate that one would have anticipated in 1983. Had it been done in a more realistic way, by stating, here's our objective, we're going to be there in 5 years or 7 years, go to it, the people would have been behind the President, I feel, without any question, we would have done it. And I think the greatest way to really understand that is by comparing it with the space program. If the space program had been approached the way SDI is approached, we'd still be debating whether or not we were going to go to the moon. But President Kennedy put forth a program. We're going to be there in 10 years, and he got the nation behind it. The President could have done the same thing about SDI. And if that were the case, we would have the first tier in place today. But it wasn't done that way. It is been actively sabotaged, basically, or let's say opposed by every military service, because each one sees the dollars coming out of its own budget. Nobody wants to pay for it, among other things.
Well, he sabotaged it himself by making it a research project.
And well, that was done by one of his presidential commissions the week before, which couched it in that context. Had he wanted it to be successful, he would have, started it at the Skunk Works, for example, which is a familiar name for a branch of Lockheed Corporation that was responsible for building things, as we say, in a covert way. And he could have, developed the strategy, the technology for, the whole planning, and then come forth, 2 or 3 years later, whenever appropriate, and said, we have no defenses as a crime. We're going to have it. And we're going to have it within 5 years. And here's the plan, and Congress would have passed it. I think one of the best examples of what can be done in that type of environment is the SR-71, which is a reconnaissance plane that was built back in the early 60s. This is a plane that was a follow-on to the U-2. It is a tremendous engineering marvel. I think today it still holds the altitude and speed records of all manned flight capabilities with fixed-wing aircraft, not spacecraft. That plane went from concept to flight test in 39 months. They started the plane with none of the technology in hand. The plane is totally developed really with titanium technology, titanium metallurgy, and all of it was developed during the process the plane was being developed. 3 years and 3 months to get a plane which was just today is even beyond the capabilities, known capabilities of any nation. And that was in the early 60s. When you understand something like that, you understand what can be done if you get away from the government bureaucrats, if you put it, as we would say, into the black as a covert program, where you say, here is my objective, I want to stop those missiles from coming down on me, you find out how to do it at the cheapest, the best, the most effective way, and you don't write them 10,000 pages worth of regulations.
Did it go into production?
It sure did. It went in, it was originally actually a fighter bomber.
Do you know how many there are today?
I believe there's probably less, well, the answer is no. The plane has had an unfortunate history. It is still the most capable airplane really in the world in that category, let's say, but they destroyed deliberately the ability to continue to produce it so that it wouldn't interfere with some of the strategic bombers that were under consideration in the late 60s and early 70s. Most recently, Congress has voted down the authorization to retrofit planes and keep them in flying condition. So it's Congress rang its death knell about during the past year to year and a half. Exactly how many planes are still flying, I don't know, and I suspect it's a classified figure.
So it's gone the way of many of our very best capabilities.
Yes, and it's a fantastic. I spent a day going over the plane with the chief engineer. It's been one of the most delightful days of my career. Just fantastic, really, and one of the best engineering achievements I've seen. Really spectacular. My training is in engineering, and it was just a wonderful day I spent going over the plane and looking at the development problems that had to be solved in the way in which they were solved in 3 years and 3 months.
And the next best day in your career is going to see it operational, and the U.S. in a posture of defense and, again, offensive.
I think one of the next best days of my career was meeting General Sejna.
Talking about Soviet strategy, we are like team with Joe. I always talk to him, look, I'm worried, Soviets want to do this. And he said, don't be worried, we wouldn't do anything anyway. So we understand each other.
Working with General Sejna has been a real pleasure. One of the things I should point out is that I got involved in Soviet studies in 1973 by accident when a couple of high officials in the Defense Department asked me to take a look at our strategy in Europe. They were concerned about the Soviet strategy and whether or not we were missing something. And so I started reading some of the Soviet documents while waiting for the normal intelligence documents to arrive, which I ordered. And the more I read about the Soviet, in terms of the Soviet doctrine, actual Soviet internal military literature, I all of a sudden found myself one day, I stopped and say, hey, you know, you've read this book 3 times. If it had been a U.S. book, you would have read the first chapter and then flipped the pages to the end. You know, you're doing something different here. And what it is the book was alive. It made sense. You know, it was really military strategy, tactics, operational art, laid out in a very professional manner. It was not filled with a lot of you know, political hand-waving of what's going to happen. It was logical, it was set out, it was coherent, and it was honest and it was true. And my background in nuclear planning goes way back before then, so I was not looking at it as a naive individual. And the second thing about it is it was totally different from anything in any of the U.S. strategies, or so-called strategy documents, or policy documents, had to say about the Soviet Union. Again, you know, our perception of them is very different from what they actually are. So I decided right then that I was not going to read any intelligence estimate. I was not going to read any Western studies. I was just going to focus on the Soviet literature. And so for roughly 3 years, I just became totally immersed in the internal Soviet military literature. First the unclassified, and then later some of the classified military literature. And so I had a very broad basis of the military writings when I ran into General Sejna.
Were you reading it in Russian?
No. No, the translations are more than enough to keep me busy. And I didn't read Russian at the time, and I decided even if I did learn to read it, I'd still have to go to somebody to ask expert advice. And so, you know, and I'm lousy at language. I have a hard enough time with English. You know, it's not a forte of mine, so I do not read Russian. But there are plenty of translations and enough. I have some very good friends that are experts in the Russian language that where I have a problem, I go to them immediately. But having read this stuff and then being introduced to General Sejna, and we started talking, we talked more and more, and it all came to life. And what he was saying was exactly as laid out in the literature, and I could see it. And so it's been throughout our working relationship really a case of both understanding it from somebody who knows it, who lived it, and then reading the literature and seeing, you know, it all laid out there, which then it came much more to life because it's very difficult to read a lot of their things because you're not entirely sure of the significance. With one sentence, they can write a whole book, you know, because of their secrecy. And so, you know, working together then just opened up a whole new era. But it's not as though you know, I was just, you know, totally dependent upon General Sejna. You know, I had a base of the Soviet literature, and it was really his confirming this base, or the base confirming, you know, his knowledge that made it so important, both of them so important.
Did I understand you to say that when you first looked at this book, it was a lie that made sense? Or a lot that it made sense?
A lot that
made sense.
The Soviet literature made sense. It wasn't just arm-waving. It wasn't dismissing problems that you know are there, but somebody's afraid to talk about. And NATO was just filled with those types of problems. You read something in the West on NATO strategy and what the NATO forces are going to do, you have to read it tongue-in-cheek, because generally the people that are writing those documents aren't aware of the fact that the plans can't be implemented. You know, they don't dwell on problems generally of mal-deployment, of ammunition shortages, of command control vulnerabilities. The place this really comes out too is when you look at NATO strategy, you don't see any attention really played very much to Soviet strategy. You don't see discussions of what's going to happen when through radio electronic combat. What's going to happen from special forces operations? What's going to happen if the nuclear strikes start the war rather than come after a conventional pause? What's going to happen as a result of the massive employment of chemical and biological weapons? I mean, these things aren't present, and in glossing over them, they create a world of fiction which people begin after a while to believe in. And this is why I sort of lost interest in that set of documents, and all of a sudden was so impressed when I started reading the Soviet documents.
What is wrong with the Western mind? What is wrong with the mind of the top military strategists, our leaders, our government, the Pentagon? Why is there such a blackout on the obvious that the common man in the street knows is obvious? It's very perturbing to us.
Many of us have asked that question, and I don't think any of us have any very satisfactory answers. I guess one of the dominant conclusions I've come to over a year is you have a tremendous fear of nuclear war. Not respect for, just a fear. It's this idea of 100 nuclear weapons is all you need. Why bother? You can't have a war. Nobody can win a war. Don't bother trying. And you have this mentality. And if you believe that, you're not going to pay any attention to it. One of the former, I believe, deputy directors of intelligence agency who had been in the arms control area and pressing arms control area and making statements that I thought were really absurd, puzzled me, and so I had lunch with him trying to see what makes him tick. And it came out in the middle of lunch very easily. His statement was, hey, once you've seen a nuclear weapon go off, nothing else matters. He was dead serious. In the dialogue on SALT II, after that had been signed by President Carter, there was a debate on television, and one of the people on the debate was a former Navy Admiral, Admiral Geiler, who had been known for his anti-nuclear sentiments. And he was testifying in favor of SALT II, and he said, hey, there aren't very many of us who have left who have seen a nuclear weapon go off, and let me tell you, it's awesome. There is no defense. The first arriving weapons do all the damage. There is no hope. Now, this is the type of image that dominates, and I really believe it does dominate, the community.